Um, I'm going to repeat this to you probably every week.
Good.
But what we want to accomplish in this class is we want to try to see if we can understand two realities, life and the reality of death, as God understands them. And I want to show you why our perception of life and death, those two realities, are probably not correct. And we're going to start doing that tonight. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of some cerebral stuff here. But we're going to go slow, and everybody's going to keep up.
That lets me out.
No, everybody's going to do well. Everybody will do well. And that's why we're going to go slow. But what I want to do tonight is I want to show you the video that I didn't show you last week, because if we're going to aim towards looking at life and death as God sees life and death, then I think we should also take a look at life and death and reality as the secular world sees it. And it's okay to do that. We're not going to offend God by looking at someone else's perspective, because it's going to help us to better understand the correct perspective, the truth about life and death. And that's what I intend for us to accomplish in the weeks ahead, is to come out of this with a much, much better understanding of life and death as it is seen from the eyes of God. And that presents some challenges, because how is it we can look at something through the eyes of God? And we'll get into that later, but for now, I want to just play this video for you and let you see it. And listen to it, watch it, see what you pick out in this. This is a secular version, a secular idea of the purpose and meaning behind life, if there is any purpose and meaning. This comes from a secular view. And so watch it with an open mind, listen to it, see what you can pick out that sticks in your mind. And then we'll talk about it just a little bit when we get done. But anyway, let's start with this, and once we finish this, we'll jump into our main subject for tonight. I think we'll start. Uh-oh. Oh, I just messed you up.
No, I was already missed it.
That's a bad thing. Hold on. Not to worry. We'll start it all over again. Hit the wrong button.
Will the universe continue?
All right, now let's try. I'll put the controls down.
Imagine you visited a beautiful beach. Then you returned the next day and there was one less grain of sand on the beach. Would it seem to be a different beach? So too would the universe continue in its way if humanity did not exist to witness it.
The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena.
We are more insignificant than we ever could have imagined. You could get rid of us and all the galaxies and everything we see in the universe would be largely the same. So we're insignificant on a scale that Copernicus never would have imagined.
Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves.
And in addition, it turns out the future is miserable. That should depress you, but I would argue that in fact, it should embolden you and provide you a different kind of consolation. Because if the universe doesn't care about us, and if we're an accident in a remote corner of the universe, in some sense it makes us more precious. The meaning in our lives is is provided by us. We provide our own meaning, and we should enjoy our brief moment in the sun. We should make the most of our brief moment in the sun because this is all we have. And even if we're so rare that we're the only life forms in the universe, which I doubt, that makes us, in some sense, while we're more insignificant, we're more special.
Whether the universe cares we exist or not, I do not need validation from the universe to find my own life significant. The concept of an afterlife places value on what is to come rather than what it currently is, thereby diminishing the importance of the here and now.
So when you always live towards the future, your life is trapped in a conceptual reality of thought forms, which assumes a greater significance for you than the immediate reality of life, which is always now. Because your life consists entirely of the present moment. If you truly realize the significance of that statement, your entire life consists of the present moment. Your life is never not this moment. Even when you remember the past, you can only remember it now. And when you think about the future, you can only think about it now. People live as if the present moment were an obstacle that they need to overcome in order to get to some better point, which never arrives. So that's a bad way to live. And it makes living hard. It makes living to an effort.
Living for the afterlife, thoughtlessly following a set of one-mounted rules which you cannot question. That's basically devaluing your life in favor of worshipping death.
If an afterlife is something greater to look forward to, then relatively speaking, our current life is lesser. And so we stop appreciating something that is for something that could be.
Try and imagine what it will be like to go to sleep and never wake up. You will find out, among other things, that it will pose the next question to you. What was it like to wake up after having never gone to sleep? That was when you were born.
I know it's a little bit hard to hear. I wish they wouldn't put background music
Yeah.
to it, particularly that loud. But from what you could hear of it, anything come out to you that sort of stood out? Make you think?
It was about going to sleep and never and waking up, or how did you say that? A little catchy there about going to sleep like as though you waking up as though you never went to sleep.
And what did that mean to you?
It's like describing death. You go to sleep and you never wake up, but you wake. I mean, you go to sleep, but you wake up you wake up in heaven. You close your eyes, go to sleep, and wake up in heaven.
Did you seem to think that this life is all there is?
Yeah, that's what it was showing.
That's
Yeah, that was pretty obvious.
And he put a little word in there, said if there's any more to it, but we know there's more to it.
Yeah. But then we didn't talk about heaven. You can make heaven on earth, and that you can do.
Uh-huh.
Not where we believe you.
And there's a lot of people that feel like that. I mean, not a lot of people. But
Yeah, there are.
there's some.
Kind of a closing statement that I think I read properly says, if there's more to it, we'll enjoy it then. Well, if there's more to it, and there is, and they didn't know it, then they won't enjoy it then. Because there's one somewhere they're not going to enjoy. So the theology is
From a Christian perspective,
from
right?
a Christian perspective.
I was noticing too, what's missing is to do with evil. What do you do with evil? You can only have that view if you don't have evil.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, that's just, there's evil that can't be your best life now.
Anybody else catch anything? I like the comment that was made early on that said there's, I'm paraphrasing, but there's absolutely nothing that can be sensed, that can be seen that's out there that we can even hope to save us. And it brings up my question of, well, save us from what? What would, if this is all that there is, there's nothing after we pass from this earth, after we die. What are we being? What are they looking to be saved from? I just thought that was an interesting statement that they made in there. Well, clearly from a perspective of those who do not hold to a God of creation, an intelligent creator, an intelligent designer. Anyway, I just wanted you to see that, because what we're going to do is, now that we've sort of heard that perspective, we want to take off and look at reality from a different perspective. And as I said, we're going to spend time looking at two realities. Reality of life and the reality of death. And beginning tonight, and that's why these next couple of weeks are so important, actually the next 3, are really important to lay a foundation for this. And I want you to really think as we go through this, because I want you to be prepared to catch the easier stuff that's going to come up after we get through the first 3 weeks of these little deeper themes. Well, when we talk about reality, what are we talking about? What is meant when somebody says, well, the reality of it is this? What do we mean when we use that word reality?
Life or death. Reality. I guess. I don't know. I used to always say when you took a week's vacation, you come back to work on Monday, you come back to reality. Yeah.
Yeah, well, think of the word, the root word that comes from. Real. Well, what is real?
Something's supposed to be truth now.
Exactly, and this is what we generally mean when we use this word reality. What is truth? What is the truth of the matter? What is the reality of it? What is the truth of it? And we've got to explore that because it becomes important to us. Why is truth important to us? Why would that be so important? In some cases, having the truth of something may not be particularly important to us. And in other cases, it could mean a matter of life and death. Let me give you some examples of that. It might be very important to know the truth about the height of this overpass, right? Because if you get information that's not the truth, it could cost you or someone their life. So in that respect, truth is pretty important, right? Now, if you put on a pair of trousers in the morning and you're colorblind and you don't know whether those trousers are green or purple, it probably doesn't really matter. You might be embarrassed, but it doesn't really matter. At least it doesn't matter to the extent that this matters, right? Or how about another example? Think about this. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Some people, though, are allergic to coconut. Some people are allergic to oranges.
Pineapple.
Before you eat this pineapple, before you eat this piece of cake, wouldn't you want to know the truth about what's in it if you're allergic to something? Like oranges. I have a friend who's allergic to oranges. I worked with him over the hospital, and I used to challenge him all the time. Hey, listen, we're all medical professionals. We know how to deal with things. I don't believe you're allergic to oranges. Come on. I challenge you. Show me. Eat this orange. But he says he carries around an epinephrine pen to give him a shot of adrenaline if he should ever accidentally eat something like this and there's orange in it. Because he'll go into an anaphylactic shock and he can end up looking something like these people here, for example.
Oh my goodness.
And so having the truth about what's in that cake is very important, right?
Yes.
And there are lots of examples that we could use. Think about this. What about you're in the market for a used car? Well, wouldn't you like to know the history of that car? Has it been wrecked? What kind of body work's been done to it? You know, what's the history of this car? Wouldn't you like to know the truth before you spend your money on this car? Truth becomes very important to you, right? Or even buying a new car or a new house or a used house. The truth of it before you spend the kind of money that a house or a car requires, the truth becomes very important to you to know that. Or we can use another example. Wouldn't you want to know the truth about who packed your parachute before you jump out of a plane? That would be kind of important to know, right? Who packed the darn thing? I'm not jumping out until I know who packed it. Did they know what they're doing? Did Tom Leighow pack it? Because if he did, I ain't jumping out. You know? And so knowing the truth about things becomes very important to us, and in some cases very critical to us. Now, those of you who sit in the back, I feel bad for you. That may cause you to have to move up here. But some of these little cartoons I'm putting up are kind of funny. But wouldn't it seem that it would be even more important that we know the truth about some things, such as the truth about life and the truth about death, the two realities that we're going to examine? In fact, I suggest to you that perhaps the two most important realities that we can study would be the reality of life and the reality of death. What is the truth behind those things? Now, let's take a look at this for just a little bit. On the surface, you're wanting me to do one.
Just a little bit, scooch over a little.
Is this way?
Yeah,
No.
because you're blocking.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's good. That's all right.
It would seem like on the surface that we could pretty easily determine what's true and what's not true. But the truth of the matter is, it's not that easy to determine the truth about something. It's not as easy as you might think. For example, not everything is black and white. The truth is not always apparent to us. At least not so apparent from our means of determining what is true. One of the big questions that philosophers like to bandy about and pose is regarding reality. How do you know that you even exist? Well, think about it for a minute. What proof do you have that you even exist? Maybe you're just a dream. Maybe you're just living a dream.
Too much pain.
I got a birth certificate that says I exist.
Yeah?
Yeah, right.
In your dream, you have this birth certificate, and what does it say?
Born June 6, 1941.
Well, this is sort of the question that our deeper philosophers like to toss about. In fact, a French mathematician and philosopher by the name of René Descartes answered this question when it was brought to him. Can you prove that you even exist? What is your evidence? What is your proof that you exist? And here's how he responded. He said, I think, therefore I am. In other words, because I can think about things and reason things out, I must be. I must exist because I can think. Now, in today's world, we have a different take on it. We might say, I tweet, therefore I am. But either way, the idea behind this is we can think, we can reason things out logically, and so therefore I must be. There's my evidence that I exist. Now, not so true with Eastern philosophy. Those of you that have been in world religions with me, we learned that in Eastern thought, Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea, the belief is that we are just an illusion, not reality. And we'll not get into Eastern thought tonight, but this is the thought that comes up, is how do you know that you exist? Are you just an illusion? And so it brings up the question then of what is truth? How do we know truth? How can we define truth? What would we say truth is? In fact, what would you say if I asked you and I said, what is truth? What would be your answer?
Jesus.
Facts.
Facts. How do you know facts are true?
I knew that was coming.
I ain't answered that. That's as far as I know.
That's as far as you go.
Well, I think it's the Bible. That's true. I mean, you know. Of course, everybody don't believe it, but I do, so I think it's the truth. Somebody hit me.
Our ability to communicate with
God.
I'm sorry?
Our ability to communicate with God.
Truth, what it really is.
Truth is right and wrong.
That's right and wrong.
To know right and wrong.
How do you know the difference between right and wrong?
Well, as a Christian, God. His Holy Spirit.
Well, if you're not a Christian,
Oh, well.
could you know right from wrong if you're not a Christian?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you don't need God to know right from wrong. Would that be a reasonable conclusion?
I think you know right from wrong from when the day was born.
What it really is.
Yeah.
Trying to remember back, you first started teaching here a couple of years ago, you spent about 5 weeks on truth. Every week you said, now next week we're really going to get into it, but I got to spend one more week on truth. And you hit a lot of, and my mind's trying to go back to it. But it seems to me that you said you've got to have a standard. You've got to have some point of a standard. What is truth? You had the tall guy and the short guy, and the different things of how you've got to work your way toward a starting point. And we were leading up to the truth of the Bible, and now we can really trust the truth of the Bible. But I'm not sure.
How about the fruit?
About what? I didn't hear what somebody said.
The
Is that you,
fruit
Chris?
that it bears.
I'm sorry?
The fruit that it
The
bears.
fruit that it bears.
Well, let's see what some other people have to say when they're asked the question about truth.
Definition of truth. The truth would be something that, when reduced all the way down to its essence, cannot be extracted any further, and is something that just fundamentally is something that is.
Truth is being honest about what's happened, and I don't know, not lying.
Truth is different for everyone, so can't really have a certain definition, because my truth may be different from your truth.
Truth to me is about the right decisions and the right choices you make in life, and how you define yourself as an individual.
The truth to me is God, to me. I mean, taking it on a religious basis, to me, God is the truth.
Your family values, all the things that you've been brought up to think of as right and wrong.
Well, if you're talking mathematically, there are formulas to prove it. If you're talking about in a human sense, I would guess experience.
Because truth can also be really nice, but it can also hurt too. Like hard truth.
Don't think there's an absolute truth. I think there's shades of gray and black and even white. But I think the most important thing about truth is respecting someone else's views and opinions.
I don't think there is an absolute when you talk about human interaction, but there are clues.
Jesus died for me, and he loves me. Yeah.
If you want to know, like, a truth about the world or something, you go to an encyclopedia.
I don't know, there's certain people I'm sure that would say go to a Bible or some other religious place. Another option might be going out to nature and kind of looking at creation and discerning it for yourself.
I go to find truth in the Bible.
We always have to constantly look for what feeds our soul. Truth comes with wisdom, the older that you get.
The opposite of a lie.
The truth isn't, something that you say. The truth is something that is here already.
I do think that truth comes from science.
I think everyone kind of has their own truth for stuff. Is there a right answer?
There's one good answer.
Yeah. Is there really only one good answer?
Well, in seminary, Dr. Norman Geisler would answer the question this way. He would say, truth is that which conforms to reality. That which really is.
What it is.
It is what it is.
In a way. Now, we're going to look at that. We're going to explore it more, because it becomes important to us, because I want you to see how we, earthly creatures, tend to come to arrive at truth, and why it is that our perspective on things may be off base because we haven't arrived at absolute truth about something. Well, how do we come to determine truth? Well, we tend to come to truth, mankind, from what we call our empirical senses, our empirical knowledge. That which we can observe, and that which we observe and can test through our sight, our hearing, our taste, our touch, and our smell. Those are the senses that we use, that God has given to us, and we use those to help us to arrive at truth. And we call those things that we arrive at empirical evidence, because we've used our senses to arrive at these things. There's a problem with this, though. And the problem is that our senses will let us down. Right? They'll fail us. And if they fail us, then there's that possibility that it may not take us to the truth of whatever it is that we're examining. For example, if I were to have you close your eyes, and I passed around something, some object, I was going to do that, but I didn't take the time, but I pass it around and I say, okay, now feel it, smell it, taste it if you want, listen to it, and then tell me what you got. Don't you imagine that if we did that, we would get a variety of different answers here, right? Because we all don't use these empirical senses in the same way. So we tend to arrive at different conclusions on things. Now, of course, you're going to say, well, but wait a minute, let us open our eyes and we'll tell you all, we'll all say the same thing. Well, that's not totally true. The problem with that is our eyes also deceive us. Let me try to show you what I mean, because not only will our taste, and our hearing, and our sight, or our touch, and our smell let us down, but our sight can actually mislead us or misguide us. So if I can show you there.
Okay, now what's he doing?
He got a cable.
He's levitating.
I know. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we know there's a trick to it.
Yeah.
But the point is that our eyes can deceive us. On the surface, it appears as though he's levitated, and the perspective that we get of this is different from the reality of it. We don't know how he's doing the trick. We sense there's a trick to it, but our eyes deceive what's going on with us. And it's important that we recognize that we don't all see things in the same way. The way I see something, in many cases, is going to be different than the way Jerry sees something. And the way he sees something is going to be different than the way David sees something, and so on. We all tend to see things in a different way. For example, what do you see here?
Ronnie and Dave.
Say what?
Ronnie and Dave.
Ronnie and Dave.
I see an umbrella.
I don't see that.
I see a senior with an umbrella, with a guitar and umbrella. Yeah. And there's somebody coming out the door right there.
Doorway.
How many of you see two faces looking at each other?
Yeah, see two faces. See two guys playing the guitar.
Okay, so you see the guy in the guitar?
That's what stuck at me first.
Playing to another woman or somebody wants to sing. A lot of different things.
Some people can't see one, but they can see the other. Some people can see the other, but not first. Some people can see both. Okay? We don't all see things the same way. And when we don't, that leads us to making the wrong perspective on something. We can arrive at a false perspective on something. And the way that we see things can have a huge influence upon our perspective on things. Now this is important to us, and I want to go slow because we're going to lead this up to looking at two realities, life and death, the way God sees it. And if, as some of you have said, the truth is in God, well, if we don't see things the way God sees them, then perhaps we don't have the truth about things. Make sense?
Yeah.
And so our task as Christians is to be able to see things through the eyes of God. the way he sees things. Hey, Mike, come on in.
But what's it mean too when he says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free"? So,
yeah, a powerful passage that is. It's a powerful scripture, and you couple that with the words that Jesus said that I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Then what we see is that apart from knowing Him completely, we can't know the truth. And what I want you to see tonight is that the things that we have based our perspective of life on are oftentimes flawed. And so the first step is to understand that we got some things wrong. I don't care that we wear a Christian hat. We got some things wrong. And it behooves us as Christians to work towards seeking God with all of our hearts and all of our souls so that we can see things the way God sees things. Yeah. Now, how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about that, but not until next week.
Well, we don't do it coming to church on Sunday and not looking at the Word the whole week and come back next Sunday.
You're exactly right. Good point. We certainly don't.
Yeah.
And if the Bible is true as we believe, the Scripture tells us, when will we find Him? When we seek Him with all of our heart.
Seek Him.
Right? And so the first place I think to start is to recognize that, hey, we got a wrong perspective on things. And if we've got a wrong perspective on some things, we probably have a wrong perspective on life and a wrong perspective on death. And that's where we're headed with this. But I want you to grasp this first, because the way that we see things has a huge influence upon the perspective that we take on something. Look at this. This is sort of interesting. One huge problem that we face on this earth is that our perspective, our presuppositions, a presupposition is something that we just believe. We don't have any evidence, we just believe it. It's called a presupposition. That some of the things that we have a perspective upon might be right in part and false in other parts. And it depends oftentimes on our perspective as to how we might see something as to whether it's good or whether it's bad. And so, in our perspective, if something is good, but we have a wrong perspective, then maybe that good is not good at all. Maybe it's bad. And vice versa. Does that make sense? That's why it's so important that we have the right perspective. And where can we get the right perspective? Well, you've already answered that question tonight. We believe only in God to find the right perspective. The Creator. If He's the Creator of life and death, then He must hold the only true model paradigm of life and death. Yeah. Make sense? Mm-hmm. You know, if He's the Creator, then from whence comes the model for life and death? It must come from the Creator. When I was a kid, I used to have an erector set. I think I've used this before, but I used to make all sorts of cool things. But when I made them, they were my creation, and I made them the way I wanted. I made them to do what I wanted to do. I made it when I wanted to make it. And if I wanted to tear the darn thing apart, I tore it apart. I was a creator. And so, something that I created from our erector set, if my dad said, hey, what's that thing? And I said, well, it's a thingamajig. Well, what's a thingamajig do? Well, here's what it does. It does what I want it to do. I created it for my purpose. And so, it behooves us as Christians to understand God's perspective on these things that we call realities, life and death. We go about making decisions every day on things. And we make those decisions based on our perspective of things. Where do those perspectives come from? Well, they come from our empirical senses, our eyes, our touch, our smell, our sight, and so forth. That's how we arrive at these things. And so we've got to examine ourselves to make sure that we've got the correct perspective, that we understand the reality of something. I'll give you another example, I think, in this video. I don't know if you caught this or not, if you can read that. But two different perspectives. You know, here's the guy screaming, wow, a boat has come. And the guy in the boat is saying, oh, wow, I finally land, you know. Depends on which, you know, perspective you're looking from. Yeah, exactly. You need to stop that? Oh, okay. Now, I think there's a little video to give you another example here.
Perception of the world around us is strongly linked to our vision, but how do you know what you're seeing is real? Can you really trust your eyes? Take, for example, these two gray rectangular columns, both of which are different shades of gray. Or are they? It turns out that they're the exact same, and yet, even after knowing the illusion is there, your eyes refuse to see them as the same. Introducing colors produces the same result. I promise, no trick photography or editing effects have been applied. In fact, if you look up the Munker white illusion, you'll come across many more examples. Examine them in Photoshop and you can see that the colors are the exact same. A similar effect can be seen with this checkerboard illusion. Tile A clearly seems darker than tile B, but you know better by now, right? Even though your eyes can't see it, you know when I remove the surrounding imagery, the tiles will be the same color. So, what's going on here? The truth is that scientists don't fully understand this phenomenon, and there are many complex biological and neurological factors taking place. Ultimately, our brains judge color and brightness in context. In other words, our brains compare the surrounding environment in order to create our perception. The purpose of our senses, or eyes in this case, is not to provide us with an absolute color or physical property of our external reality, but to interpret what we see as efficiently as possible in order to interact with our environment most appropriately. The tile illusion takes advantage of this phenomenon. Our brains know that shadows make objects look darker. As a result, the brain compensates by interpreting the tile as being lighter than it appears, until we take the shadow away. Perhaps the most blatant example is this gradient. The middle bar is simply one color. Remove the background gradient and it becomes obvious. Once again, the darkness of the background has affected our perception of the bar's color. Our perception is relative. So, do you still trust your eyes?
And really the question is, do you still trust your senses?
Now I'm going home. That's why can these things be done.
It's kind of frightening in a way, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Because we now can clearly see that the things that we use to arrive at truth, to arrive at reality, let us down. We can't really trust our eyes, we can't really trust our hearing, we can't really trust our smell and our taste and so on. Because they let us down, as we've already seen. And yet those are the things that we use to come to our understanding of reality. Those are the things we use to arrive at our perspective on things. And if we have the wrong perspective on things, it can lead to all sorts of problems, as we saw earlier. Right? So, it behooves us to know the truth, and the way we arrive at the truth is having the correct perspective on things. And how do we arrive at our perspective? Well, it doesn't seem like the best way is through our eyes and our nose and our touch and our senses. It doesn't seem like the best way because, as we've just seen, that lets us down. I'll give you another example. Let me help you. Do you see 4 logs up here, or do you see 3?
I see both.
See both, yeah.
I see, I see
If you look at it just to help those who can't see the, if you look at this end, you see 3, right? But if you look at it from this end over here, then you see 4. It depends on the perspective, right?
Tom, when we built our house, we had, in the den, we had an arch put in. Then we had a little alcove, and then we have the living room, and we have the arch for if you're going out, to the door. Going out. And when we stand in the den and look, you can see the complete thing, and it looks like that one's bigger than the one that I'm looking at in here.
You've got a natural optical illusion in your house.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
Exactly. And everybody looks at it. I show it to them, and everybody stands and looks at it, and they're the same size. But we're looking from the den into where the other one is, it's it's like this, and then the other one is It's just amazing how it looks.
We'll have to come over there for supper tomorrow night.
Yeah, exactly.
If you come, bring your supper. I don't do
We'll have Arnold cook.
We'll go to Chick-fil-A. How about that? Or Cooley
Well, the same thing is true in your dressing. You know, if you wear a dark bottom, it's slenderizing, or a dark dress, it's slenderizing. If you wear horizontal stripes, it makes you look larger, and that button down vertical is.
Yeah, exactly. We can actually use those illusions to our benefit. But of course, the bottom line question is, how are we using them so that we arrive at the reality, the truth of something? And that's what we're looking for, is to see how we can arrive at truth. And we're looking at the truth on two particular subjects, life and death.
So, Tom, when I see a rainbow, then it could be illusion.
Do you think?
Well, after today,
Well, after that, you don't know what you see.
Can't believe her eyes.
Sometimes you can't believe your eyes.
I wonder that word if I gave somebody a 10 and said, no, it's really 100.
Now, to carry this just a little bit further, because I want to really plant this, because I told you we're going to go slow, because I want you to grasp the concept here. Have any of you heard the story of the blind man, the 6 blind men and the elephant? I bet you Tina has.
I don't remember it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to tell you the story of the elephant and the 6 blind men. And I was going to tell it to you myself. I thought, well, I might run out of voice, so I'll get a professional storyteller to tell it. But this is a story of 6 blind men and an elephant. And here's the story.
When conflict arises, we have 2 options. We can choose to continue the conflict or to problem solve. This parable from India deals with times when people misinterpret what is really going on and they jump to the wrong conclusions. In the case of this particular story, 6 blind men encounter an elephant. Listen for how each blind man perceives what an elephant looks like. Once upon a time, there were 6 blind men living in the same town. One day, a woman brought her elephant to their town. The woman said, "Come and see my beautiful elephant." The 6 blind men gathered together and tried to decipher what an elephant would look like. One blind man said, "I wonder what an elephant looks like. I will touch him and see." Another blind man said, "Exactly. The only way to determine what an elephant looks like is by our sense of touch." Therefore, each blind man decided they would take turns touching the elephant. Then they would share what they had discovered with the others. The first blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the side of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a wall." That's it exactly. The elephant is like a wall. The second blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the tusk of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a spear." Yep, that's what an elephant is like. It is like a spear. The third blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the tail of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a rope." That's it. An elephant is like a rope. The fourth blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the leg of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a tree." That's it. An elephant is like a tree. The fifth blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the ear of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a fan." That's it exactly. The elephant is like a fan. The sixth blind man walked up to the elephant. As he reached out his hand, he found himself touching the trunk of the elephant. He announced, "Oh, I get it. The elephant is like a snake." That's it exactly. The elephant is like a snake. Of course. Each blind man was totally convinced that he had made the one true discovery. Each man argued his case valiantly. Each man felt that he was telling the truth and could not be convinced otherwise. So, who was telling the truth and who was telling a lie? That's what often happens with conflict situations. Each person perceives the conflict in a totally different way, based on his or her background, experiences, training, and personality. Who is to say how close each person comes to viewing the situation as it really is? As for the 6 blind men, each man perceived a portion of the truth. Too bad they couldn't have combined their experiences to gain a broader idea of the true nature of an elephant. So, what is your truth? How would you describe an elephant? How close do you think your answer comes to the true answer? Only the Creator knows for sure. And that was the parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. The end.
I was going to seminary, sitting next to some very highly intelligent people, way smarter than me. In critical thinking, we went through the story of the 6 men and the 6 blind men and the elephant. So, believe it or not, this is seminary level stuff you guys are learning. Toned down so that we can all understand it a bit. But now think about it this way too. Carry it a little further. We take our senses, our taste, our sight, our touch, smell, and so forth. We arrive at wrong conclusions. Those conclusions become our perspective on things. And then we go out into the world and do battle, defending those perspectives adamantly. Right? We'll fight for what we think is the truth. And far too often, what we're trying to defend is not the truth at all. Sometimes the truth in part, sometimes not the truth at all. But you can see from this how flawed our perspective can be, because the things that we arrive at using our senses can lead us astray. Now, I think Dolly may have something like this in her house, but this is just a couple more examples. You've probably seen something like this. This is a boy much smaller than his brother, but here in this picture he looks much larger. It's just because of the perspective, right? The way the thing is built, the room is built, slanted down this way, making him look like he takes up the whole space. And so the truth of the matter is, okay, well, we had a little glitch in the recording last night, and we were cut off right at this point. So I'm just going to finish it up here at home, add it to what we accomplished last night, and then I'll get that on YouTube very, very soon. Anyway, what I've been trying to demonstrate all evening is that we're seeking to know the truth about something, seeking to know reality. How do we come to know reality? And what I've been trying to show you is that even the methods that we use to determine what is true, what is reality, is not always reliable. Our smell, our taste, our touch, even our eyes deceive us. And when that happens, we can't come to know what real truth is, what reality is, when we're deceived even by our own senses. And as I've already shown, even our eyes deceive us. I'll show you one more video that helps to demonstrate that seeing is not always leading us to what is actually happening, what is actually true. Now watch this bit of magic for a moment, and you'll see again what I mean by this.
Can you bring Bitmo? A brick ball? It's a little different. I want to see you. I'm not allowed to start. I'm not allowed to start painting. I'm not allowed to start painting. What do you think? Where do you want me to shot? Let's go. Come on, let's shot. Where you going? We can't go that far. They come with me for 1 second, please. We'll stop right before the thing. I want you to help me. Come up here. Wait, no, come over here. Face me. You come up here. Can you guys see? Ready? There's no way you can stand there, boy.
I've been in 25 years. I think he's been in like 33. Well, this was forward fit. I mean, we actually getting forward with his hand.
I see you been that ball like that. I ain't never seen that happen. Incredible hole. No problem at all. How? I seen something amazing. But on TV, I ain't think that was real. I see it real now. I finally see, like, yeah, David Blaine, he real.
Now, notice it's interesting what he says here. He says, I see it now. I see it. It's real. It's real. David Blaine is real. I see it now. What he saw with his eyes, he believed then to be reality, to be real. And the truth of the matter is, that was a trick. And what he was seeing was not actually what he thought he was seeing. And so our eyes do deceive us and lead us to wrong conclusions. Well, we've already demonstrated this optical illusion in an earlier picture, but I just want you to see that even when we see something with our own eyes, it may not always be the reality that is before us. And remember, reality, coming from the word real, it may not be real. But our eyes will tend to lead us to believe that it is real. And then we'll defend adamantly those things that we have in our head that are real, which, as we've seen, oftentimes is not always the case. For example, what are you seeing here? What is real? On first sight, with just a quick examination of this, it looks pretty strange and odd. We might not quite understand what we're seeing. Well, I think it should be obvious from all that we've gone through that our perspective on reality is not always particularly accurate, whether we use our sight, our taste, our ears, our sense of touch. Not always accurate, and therefore doesn't always lead us to the truth. Doesn't always lead us to reality. And this can have a far-reaching application to our lives, particularly when it regards the reality of life and the reality of death. And yet we make decisions, we plan strategies and move through our life not having a true grasp of reality, of truth, because our own senses, the means that we use to determine what is true, what is reality, will let us down. Is not always giving us the truth. Now, of course, this raises a question of how it is that we can come to know real truth. How do we come to know reality? If our senses let us down, if our eyes let us down, our ears let us down, our sense of touch lets us down, and doesn't always lead us to truth, then how can we come to know if something is true or something is false? How do we know if something is true or it's a lie? Well, here's one way of distinguishing between whether something is true or whether it's a lie.
Jared, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Well, that's a George Costanza way of determining whether something is true or a lie, if you believe it. It's interesting that that has a lot of application because we go through life with what we call presuppositions, ideas in our head that we don't really have any evidence for. We just believe these things. We call them presuppositions. We presuppose certain things, whether we have evidence to support it or not. Maybe something that we saw with our eyes or determined with our touch or we heard, and we know that those senses let us down, yet when they lead us to believe that something is true or is reality, we will adamantly defend that belief to our death sometimes. Now, again, that can have far-reaching application to our life, and particularly when it regards life and when it regards death. Some people will say that science is the only way of coming to know truth, that science is the only means that we have of determining reality. Well, this is Stephen Hawking. Many of you may be familiar with Stephen Hawking. He's a theoretical physicist, a brilliant scientist, a brilliant man, director of research at the Center for Research at the University of Cambridge. Absolutely brilliant man. Here's a statement that he makes. He says, the universe does not have just a single existence or history, but rather every possible version of the universe exists simultaneously. Now, what Hawking is saying here is that he is suggesting that everything that can possibly happen is happening simultaneously throughout many universes. He believes that there are a multiplicity of universes. In fact, an infinite number of universes. And within all of those universes, every circumstance, every situation that can happen is happening. For example, you drive down the road and you decide to turn left instead of right. Well, had you have turned right, the circumstances that would have followed that right-hand turn are happening somewhere. And that's what he's suggesting. Now, I find it a bit interesting because in some ways it parallels what we're going to be studying about the nature of God. And that is God's eternal realm. The Bible says that God is eternal, And if God is eternal, then he exists in a realm in which there are no moments. There's no past. There's no future. God exists in what we call an eternal now. We're going to get into that within the next week or two and really study that deeply to help you grasp it. It's not an easy concept to understand, but for right now, just grasp the idea that it can be, that God can exist in a realm in which there's no time, there's no past, and there's no future. It's just now. An eternal now, because God is eternal. At least if the Bible is true, as we believe. Anything that is eternal cannot exist within moments, no time. And again, we're going to get into that. But I just find it interesting that Hawking's comments has some parallelism to the realm in which God exists. But the question comes from this, though, is can science really tell us what the truth is, what reality is? Is that the only way, is that a reliable way to come to recognize and understand reality, to know truth? By what means do we come to recognize something true, and by what means do we come to recognize reality? Well, I want you to catch this video and listen to what these people have to say about truth and knowing truth, and as truth and reality relate to God. One point that comes out strongly in this video is that real life, which we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, that real life is found only in God. And so we're going to have to explore that. If that's the case, then what exactly does that mean? Well, watch and listen to this video.
I think probably one of the main issues that people wrestle with is the reality of God. And when we do not understand this cosmic battle that has been raging from the very beginning between God's truth and the lies of the world, the flesh, and the devil, we take the truth claims of the world as if they're true. And when we live according to the lies and the illusions of the world, then we suffer deeply.
The single most important question any human being can ask is the question, what is truth? So when Pilate looked at Jesus, and Pilate says, what is truth? And walks away. Pilate walked away from the greatest authority on the greatest question and committed the greatest crime at that time.
Well, a question, what is truth? That's a really hard question. What is truth? What is truth? We understand it in a way that makes sense for us.
Truth is very hard to give a definition to, I think.
It's one of the most pivotal times in history. I have never sensed a more momentous occasion than now. The world is reeling with uncertainty. It's almost like it's in the air.
Everything's truth is coming from our mind, I believe.
I might interpret truth through the lens of science. I might interpret truth through the lens of some ideology, perhaps communism.
We've got a crisis of truth, not only in the universities, but in the culture. For us, truth is relative and subjective and pragmatic and so on. At its worst, truth is dead.
What is truth?
different people with different value systems may have different, what they see as truth.
I truly believe there's a difference between fact and truth.
There is a real sense of fear and uncertainty, and nobody seems to have the answers.
Truth is hard to define because everybody sees things in different ways. I have a bit of the truth. You have a bit of the truth.
Truth is everything's coming from our insides. That's truth never coming from the outside.
There are many ways to interpret, understand, and experience truth. It's relative.
The need is great. We are seeing more and more the body of Christ conforming to the world. Our divorce rates are not that much different. Sexual addiction, our outlook on life is not that much different from the rest of the world.
And in our churches, this whole move towards doctrinal vacuum, where the person knows less and less of why they believe what they believe, has been a dangerous amputation that has taken place.
The relativism, like a rot, has eaten deeply even into Christian circles. Christians who've given up truth in the name of all the postmodern skepticism are absolute fools, and they're destroying the very foundations in which we're sitting. Truth is fundamentally about who God is. Those who take God seriously take truth seriously.
One of the things we're going to do is to confront students with whether or not they really live as if the truth claims that God has given to us are really real.
It is a long time coming. A project such as the Truth Project. The question of truth and training minds in how to approach truth is of importance that cannot be gainsaid.
We're hoping to build that framework and that belief, that confidence that God has indeed spoken to us, and He is who He says He is, and He can be trusted. When an individual begins to understand that we're not left to just flounder around on our own, but there are truth claims of God that deal with every area of life, and that they can be trusted, whether we're talking about sociology, we're talking about anthropology, we're talking about science or history, law or politics, economics, it does not matter. You can trust that God has given to us the framework of truth from which we can stand upon and live. God is saying, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I am convinced that that is exactly what truly transforms people. And you will find it to be one of the most glorious moments in your life. There isn't anything that is more thrilling to me than to see an individual when all of a sudden their eyes light up and they begin to understand who God really is and what it means to really believe that He not only really is, but what He has said and the promises of God are really true. It's to see them so hunger for who God is that they themselves, as 1 Corinthians says, become transformed, metamorphed into the very image of Christ. And that means that when God weeps, we weep. That which He calls evil, we see as evil. What He sees as glorious and good, we see as glorious and good.
Well, Dale Taggart's comment, his vision that he hopes that what will come from the Truth Project. This is a program that he's working on developing that will go out worldwide. because of the importance of understanding truth. But what he said was his dream, his hope, his vision is that he will come to see people's eyes light up when they suddenly come to realize and recognize who this God is that we hold up and worship. Folks, this is not a mamby-pamby God. This is a God who is vastly more infinite, vastly more powerful, vastly more knowledgeable, vastly more omnipresent than we can ever possibly imagine. This is a God that goes beyond our ability to comprehend. And we need to come to a greater understanding of who this God is that we worship. And so it is my hope that as we go through the weeks ahead in this study, that I will see eyes light up, and I can read in those eyes that I got it. I got it. I see God from a different perspective. Wow. And I would hope that we would have that occur in the classes that will follow. One of the things that was said here by Os Guinness that is rather frightening is that truth is dead. Well, think about that a moment. I think that what he is saying is that, particularly in this country, we have turned our backs on truth, even claiming that truth is relative. There's no absolute truth. It's just relative. Truth is what you deem it to be. Truth is what I deem it to be. And we probably differ on what truth is. So there's no absolute truth. It's different for each person. And therefore absolute truth is dead. Well, if that's true, and I believe that that's where our country is headed in this society that we call postmodern relativism, where everything is just relative, I think that's where we're headed. Then if truth is truly dead, then Nietzsche is right. God is dead. Because Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. Jesus said, I'm the life. And that no one comes to the Father except through Him. Well, if Jesus is truth, and it's true that truth is dead, then Jesus is dead. And so that's a frightening statement to consider. Another statement that was made is that those who take truth seriously take God seriously. That is certainly a true statement, because if we don't take God seriously, then we're not taking truth seriously, because God is truth. And if we don't take truth seriously, then we don't take God seriously. And so that's why this study, understanding what truth is, what reality is, becomes very important to us. Now, up through tonight, we've spent the last several weeks laying a foundation for thinking about how we come to know truth, the two realities that we want to study, the reality of life and the reality of death. And now what we want to do is turn our study of focus to these two realities, life and death. We're going to have to now come to see how it is that we can come to see things through the eyes of God. If God is truth, and only from Him comes reality, then how can we see things as God sees them. And this is where we're going to spend our time in the weeks ahead, trying to understand how we can come to see things as God sees them. And we're going to focus on two things: life and death. And so in the weeks ahead, we'll take a look at this. So we'll conclude for this evening, and I will work to get these classes that we've had so far. I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to work to get them on YouTube so that you can catch up on anything you've missed. And next week, we're going to begin to take a look at the metaphysical aspects of God. Metaphysical just refers to the supernatural aspects of God. The aspects of God that go beyond our sight, our taste, our touch, our own senses, beyond the physical to the supernatural, beyond the natural to the supernatural. And so next week we're going to take a look at the supernatural aspects of God and let that lead us into a study of our textbook, A Paradigm of Death, understanding death from God's perspective. So we'll close for tonight, and we'll see everyone next week.